Well, hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. My name is Adrienne Furness, and I'm the Executive Director of the Benton Institute for Broadband and Society. I want to recognize our two partners, and then I'll recognize the last one as I go through my little chat. But I want to thank Nancy from Illinois Extension, who's been a wonderful partner to us in these two programs we've been managing on behalf of the Illinois Office of Broadband, the Illinois Connected Communities Program, and this is now Cohort 2 of the Accelerate program. And Illinois Extension has been a fabulous partner. You'll be hearing from them a lot over time. I also want to say good morning to Matt Schmidt, who is here as the Director of the Illinois Office of Broadband, and I'll ask him to say a few words after I recognize the rest of the team and tell each of you that we have one team member that is assigned to each community and will sort of be lurking on your breakout rooms. So Bill Coleman, who's your community coach for the whole and runs the program on behalf of Benton as our consultant, is going to be working with Kankakee County and Pembroke CDC. Robbie Macbeth, to give a wave, Robbie, is my colleague at the Benton Institute, and he tells me he used to go camping at Ogle County. So he is going to be, thank you, the Loudon State Park. And he'll be working with the Ogle County people. Grace Tepper, also wave Grace, is going to be working with Livingston County. Shabika Argowal will be doing a number of different things with you. She'll be working with Bond County, but she's also the person that works with Bill on all the mapping that you're gonna receive, telling you where broadband is and isn't. And then Adrian Pickett is working with with the Greater Peoria Economic Development Council, which has brought to the table Peoria County and Woodford County. And I will be working with the Kaskaskia College area. Now, I want to recognize a couple of other people on this call. I normally don't do this, but since the underwriter of the Accelerate program is Heartland Forward, Heartland Forward also underwrites the Lead for America Fellows, and we're privileged to have two of them active in two of the teams here. So Gracie Klukas, there she is working with Peoria and Woodford, and Mary Gay is working with Kaskaskia College. So I do want to just recognize again that Heartland Forward's generosity through their Connecting the Heartland initiative makes this program possible. And I don't know, is anybody here, Bill, from Heartland Forward, or did we expect
I don't think
much
so.
of? Okay, Abby is in San Francisco, so getting up at 6:30 could be a bit difficult. I can only say for myself, it's a bit difficult, though my dog did get me up early this morning. But I am going to turn it over to Matt to say hi, and then we'll go back to Bill. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We're really looking forward to the 14 weeks. Thanks.
Well, thanks so much, Adrienne, and thanks to all the partners that you had mentioned. I mean, this is really a great effort, and it's only made possible by all the great collaborators that have pitched in: Heartland Forward, Benton Institute, University of Illinois Extension, and of course our communities. And I always stress that at the Office of Broadband, that we may have a grant program, we may have an Office of Broadband that's trying to round out our work in different ways. But if it's not for local communities that want to step up and seize the moment together with us, well, it's just not going to work as well as it otherwise might. And so we're really excited about this Accelerate Illinois program. As Adrienne and Bill had mentioned, we've got one cohort under our belt, looking forward to the work of the second cohort. And we really feel as though this work is integral to making the most of this historic moment with state and federal investment in broadband. It's probably hard to miss it, but in 2019, Governor Pritzker and the General Assembly invested $420 million into our Connect Illinois program. In early 2020, we launched that matching grant program. We have 2 rounds of funding under our belt, and we are looking forward to accepting applications throughout the year for round 3 of Connect Illinois this year. And then we've got significant federal funding that comes online in 2023 that will allow us to continue to make grants for years into the future. And so when you look at this opportunity, there's the urgency of now to get better broadband in our communities, but we also have truly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to extend network access, build infrastructure in a way that's going to serve our communities for the long haul. And so we do look at it as a decade-long kind of investment. And so just a couple of notes quickly, then I'll pass the mic. Folks may have caught in the news that we have paused round 3 of our Connect Illinois program. What that means for you, we're not going to be making any awards likely over the next couple of months, but we're really looking forward to working with potential applicants, to accepting awards, to putting you in a position that when you come out of this cohort in the 14 weeks, that you'll be poised to submit an application or partner with the state however you'd like to. And so if you've got any questions along the way, we're happy to provide some details. But the long and the short of it is we're putting our program, which we consider to be nation leading in a lot of ways, into administrative rule. Basically, it's going to be here for the long haul. And so we look at it as a great opportunity to put in, not statute, but administrative rule, the ways that we go about our grant making. And so with that said, I just want to congratulate everybody on the call for leaning into this moment to collaborate over broadband expansion. I say it often, community-driven broadband provides better broadband for the community. And so your voices are going to make a world of difference. Thanks a lot for leaning into this. If you got any questions along the way, let me know. Otherwise, I'll bow out and just listen. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Matt. Go ahead, Bill.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Bill Coleman and live in near St. Paul, Minnesota, and happy to be working with folks in Illinois with this Accelerate program. We created this program in Minnesota through the Blandon Foundation, which has a great broadband website. There's all kinds of content there, and we'll be chasing you there throughout the program for some of the archived videos assigned during the week. And so now I've got another great client in the Benton Institute, putting communities really at the center of community broadband planning, and excited to start this group of 14 weeks with our 6 communities. And it's funny, we have quite a number of definitions of community. We've got mostly individual counties, but we've got a pair of counties working together. We've got a community working within inside of a county, and then we've got a multi-county group centered around Kaskaskia College. And so definition of community is really always up to you to decide who's in our community, who can we really partner with to make things happen, in figuring out the right level of geography for this kind of action. And so I think you'll find that within your own efforts, that if you're in a county, you might say, be chunking out your county into different parts to decide, what strategy is best for which part of the county. Some of these multi-county groups will be doing that as well, but at a different level of geography. But it's all flexible, and it's really up to the people on your teams to make this work by working together with a unified voice and a unified vision. And we hope through this program to really increase your knowledge of broadband and technology and the ways that broadband is getting done in places in Illinois and across the country, and help you decide what's the best model for your community to move forward on broadband. And we're likely to have a variety of approaches that you develop for your own community. So there's no single right path that we can just rubber stamp the plan. And that's why you guys have to do this hard work. We're gonna take a few minutes to go into your breakout rooms so that you can, and I probably should have warned Nancy on this, but we have our 6 communities, and we know that, it's nice to think that everybody knows each other, but I think these are new teams, and we're going to go into your rooms and just have everyone introduce themselves to each other. And we're going to look at your name and your, what organization, what role you play in the community there locally. and kind of your broadband story, because we know that many of the people on these calls are working on this program because their own broadband situation is not great. And so just a quick little, about a minute per person. And then we'll come back and we actually have about 20 minutes for this little breakout room. So Nancy could, and then for people who don't know about breakout rooms, Nancy, maybe you could give a little tutorial on how that works.
Sure. I'm going to go ahead and open those up so you can see them, but you'll be able to select on your own. If you don't see the sort of pop-up window there, you'll go down to the bottom of this Zoom platform and you'll select Breakout Rooms. It's an icon that has 4 boxes there that sort of looks like a window, and you'll be able to select your room. The rooms are titled with your team names, and then anyone who has any sort of issue, I can manually put you in there as well. So I'll go ahead and get that opened up and let people file in to their best of their ability and assist where I need to be assisting. And so I see people are starting to fill into those rooms pretty easily, and that's great. So if you want to unmute yourself and let me know which team you'd like to join, if it's not apparent on your name, or put something in the chat box as well, then I can also assist you by manually putting you into your chat, into your breakout room. And I'm going to pause the recording until we reconvene in the larger room.
Good. Are we seeing the full screen or are we seeing my preview?
Looks good, Bill.
Okay, thank you. And so here we have, of course, our sponsors that for the program, and without each and every one of those organizations, that really wouldn't be possible for this work to happen. So it's nice to have that team here in Illinois. And so we've got, here's the agenda for today, and we're going to be talking now, we're on the right-hand column already, so moving forward rapidly. We're going to go back in, I'm going to do a little presentation on kind of the program, and then a little broadband 101. Heard a little bit in the Kankakee team that there's folks that don't know much about broadband, so you'll know a lot more after today, but don't worry if you don't get it all the first time, because we build this in throughout the program, where you'll learn more and more detail over the weeks. And then we're going to go back into our rooms and just talk about going forward, the logistics, your own internal communications with your team members, anyone who's missing that should be a part of your team. And then we always adjourn on time. Usually you'll meet, we have a hour first of large group, and then you meet in your teams for up to an hour or more if you want, and so on. So here's our 6 communities. We've got Bond County, Kankakee, Kaskaskia College, Livingston County, Ogle County, and the Peoria Woodford joint initiative. So hopefully you make some new friends across the state of Illinois through this program. As I mentioned earlier, our goal is to help empower your team to pursue and succeed to achieve the best possible broadband solution for you. And as I mentioned, each one of your communities is kind of like a puzzle. There can be great broadband in some places. I heard already today that one person on the team has great broadband, but just across the road, a few hundred feet away, people don't have really any wired options. And so some of that is luck, some of that is all the federal policy, some of it is just there might be a railroad track or something that stops that broadband from crossing. And so we hope to help you find your solution, and that solution might be a combination of approaches moving forward. You know, we've got these overlapping phases throughout the program, and I apologize, I missed my dates here in the bottom when I updated this PowerPoint presentation, but here we are starting in May, and in August will be complete. But throughout the program, leadership education is really the #1 goal of this program, is to help you come up with the best possible solution for your communities, for you to feel confident as you deal with the technology and the financing and the partnerships, to feel confident you're doing right for your community. And so we gather a lot of information, especially early on in the first 6 to 8 weeks of the program, by doing a community survey, by interviewing broadband providers, by looking at the state and federal maps that are available for broadband. After that, we spend the last several weeks of the program really looking at what are your opportunities and what is the plan that you're going to implement. And over the in weeks 12 and 13, I meet individually with the communities to help them go through kind of what have we learned and what are we going to do next, to come up with a plan that then in August, you'll be able to say, hey, we're going to report to your county boards or to your Chamber of Commerce boards or economic development groups or whoever you're trying to spread this message to about what the plan is for the future. Hopefully by the end of this, you'll have a great idea whether you want to build your own network or which providers you want to partner with and which funding sources are the most appropriate for your community, and be able to really jump right in and take the next steps. This Accelerate program is a rapidly paced program. It is a sprint, but know that broadband network deployment might be more of a marathon. And so we hope to get you off to a great and fast start for something that you can make some progress on. When we think about the leadership education, we ask you to watch the archived webinars that will be assigned every week. And we'll usually send those assignments out on Friday. And so you have the whole weekend to watch that webinar if you like. Each week we'll have experts from around the country. These include consultants, they include community members that have been through this process before, and talk about what they know and share that with you. The inter-community conversations that we'll have between our 6 communities, especially valuable. I think people really see get the feeling that they're not in this all alone, that this is something that takes place and needs to take place in communities all over Illinois. And then your own community team discussion. We allocate an hour for that every week, and hope that you use that as your team meeting to plan out your work schedule, how surveys are going to be distributed, when you're going to invite providers to have a conversation, all those kind of things to keep that conversation going. One of the things that takes place in these meetings is the idea of what's our broadband vision. And we'll spend some time on that in the coming weeks to give you a sense of, what are we really chasing? What does success look like for us? And that happens in those community team discussions. And you don't have to use that full hour. Some communities meet kind of briefly and then have I see some communities are meeting kind of on site now. Some communities want to get together and get off the Zoom and have the personal conversations. How you do that is really up to you. This is your planning process. We're here to help and direct, but it's really your team that is going to create this plan. As a broadband consultant, I've seen many plans that look very similar, produced by consulting firms, kind of those find and replace kind of documents that end up being put on a shelf because there's just so many questions left to answer and no community consensus about what the right path is. And so through this program, number one job is for your team is to come to a great consensus about what are the best approaches and what's possible in our community, whether that's financially or politically or whatever the constraints are, to make sure that your plan is right for your community. And then, of course, the consideration of the gathered information taking place throughout the process, but then also at the end. When we talk about the information gathering, I've mentioned community surveys, and Nancy will be presenting on that in a couple weeks. We've got a great survey. It's all set up for data entry. It's possible to make some adjustments to that, some changes, but we really encourage you to move forward quickly on that survey, because if you spend too much time on that survey, changing it, wordsmithing it, by the end of the, you'll be behind. And then when we'll get to the end of the 14 weeks, the survey won't be complete, and you won't be able to use that in part of your planning. So your plan will say, oh, we're planning to plan later, which to me is not quite optimal. It's not quite failure, but it's not quite optimal from my point of view. Again, interviewing providers, who's your existing providers, who might come in and be a provider, and again, looking at the state maps and so on. When we come to the next steps, your plan will be in with your team to help you over a 2-week period. Some communities want to meet once for a couple hours. Some communities take 2 2-hour planning sessions. We're willing to work with you on that. And it's really, what are we planning to do? What's our structure? Who's going to do this? What's our ownership ideas? And again, what kind of financial commitment can we get from the state of Illinois, or now the upcoming federal dollars, which have been big headlines, but know that those won't really be available till 2024 for some of the big infrastructure bill that was passed. So there's other federal programs that we can, that will highlight as well, that may be more timely for you. And then the report to the community. We love it when you get out there and share the information you've gathered. In some ways, this is a technical issue, but in a lot of ways, it's more of a political, sociological issue. And so getting out there in the community, finding additional community champions, pursuing your solution. And then you'll see that we have, and I did update this calendar, kind of a weekly topic. And we're going to move forward, and actually, I thought I did this right, but community surveys will actually, in broadband mapping, are swapped. And so we want you to know more about mapping before you think about the surveys, because the speed test part to the mapping is an important feature. And you can see we go through this, and a couple weeks in the middle, we kind of take, I won't say a break, but we bring in some timely speakers and experts that really help you understand what are the best opportunities for your community. Key factors, your strong team involvement, attending every week is important. Attending to the work tasks. You don't want to say, let a week go by without getting your work done. And so not falling behind schedule. Just encourage you to push through and know that it's going to be a lot of work here early on, but then that slacks off a little bit as you get those surveys and provider interviews completed. Develop that consensus on the broadband vision. Understand that this is a dynamic process, that you can make plans, but don't be afraid to adjust those as you learn more. And again, that accelerates a sprint, but broadband is a marathon. And so that is my the presentation on the program. Do people have questions that come to mind? Either in the chat or in the out loud, don't be afraid. Good. Well, if that's That's good. Then you know what you're facing over the next 4 weeks, how your summer is going to go. And it's exciting though, because sometimes I think the value of this program is the speed of it really helps build the momentum. You know, and I know that sometimes it'll be a little frustrating, maybe a little confusing. Don't be afraid ever to call me. I'm your prime contact. So Nancy's on the team, and we've got your community reps from the Benton team and everything. But really consider me your first point of contact on questions and process, and really want to help you in any way that we can, whether that's a technical question or if something's not going great with your team. I've dealt with a lot of communities over the years, and really interested in helping you overcome any of those challenges. Okay, then I'm going to jump right into another presentation, and this one is kind of a broadband 101, and it is help people understand some of the technologies and the strengths and weaknesses of those. We heard some of those detailed understanding of when your service works and doesn't work. You know, what some of those challenges are with that. And so I'm going to share my screen, and I will definitely provide my contact information. And maybe I could ask Adrienne Furness to just put that in the chat for me. That would be great.
Hey, Bill, before you start, this is George, just out of curiosity. Will we have access? You know, obviously we have a large amount of new folks to this initiative, and obviously I don't think we want to reinvent the wheel, but will we have access to surveys and survey questions for best practices purposes that you guys have experienced in Minnesota and other states that are more accelerated than we are?
Yeah, absolutely. Nancy's going to talk on surveys on week 3. Well, we have a survey instrument. It's all set up. We've got messaging information for you to send out to your communities, and I think kind of press release kind of information. The survey instructions are well honed. Nancy's been doing a great job for us. Greatly improved process and structure since Nancy took the lead on that. Nancy, go ahead.
Yeah, just want to reiterate to the teams. I had sent an email to each of the teams with just a few points of action. One was the form to get your additional team members registered so they'll receive communications, but the other item was a survey template that was attached to that email. And if you didn't see that, or if it wasn't included for some reason, please let me know. I'll put my email in the chat. But I want to get that survey design in front of you as early as possible so that your team can look at it and see if there's any sort of additional questions you want to ask your residents and business owners, etc. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, and just one thing we've seen broadband surveys that are about 20 or 30 questions. Know that the rate on abandoning those surveys is quite high. People get halfway in and say, well, that's enough of that. I think you get the survey from the airline, they say, oh, this will just take a minute, and then it doesn't really. So we want it's better to get great information on the most important questions than a little bit of information on things that aren't as important. So that's my encouragement on that. So, but here we go on Broadband 101, and know that there's a ton of words with broadband. There's a whole new language out there for you to get confused on, and there's differences of opinions on different technologies, and just know that you have to sort through that and bring your own understanding and listen to your team members as you have these discussions about what kind of broadband service is right for your community. what are the strengths and weaknesses of each of these technologies, and they certainly all have strengths and weaknesses. And we're going to go a quick overview on that right now. And so a lot of times when we think about, how good is my broadband service, the download speed is what people talk about. How fast can we get information from the internet? And so people say, well, I've got 25 megabits or 100 megabits or a gigabit of service, which is 1,000 megabits. And that's all well and good. But we found out from the pandemic now, when people are working from home, that upload speed has become really important. People still predominantly download information, but more and more there's more upload things happening. Certainly on a call like this, you're uploading a constant stream of your video camera to the world through Zoom. If you're using things like Dropbox or iCloud or any of these other kind of services where your files are either saved on your up in the internet or they're backed up there, a constant flow of information going that way as well. And so we just know that this upload speed, whether it's from security cameras at your home or your business or farm, all those things are beginning to make upload speed increasingly important. And of course, once you have that speed, we want it to be reliable. The more you're using broadband at home, if you're at your office chair in your home from 8 to 4:30, if you have constant outages, even if it flickers for a second or a minute or 5 minutes or some places 3 days, that really hurts people's ability to earn a living from home or go to school from home. And so that reliability is a critical issue that we know is make or break for many people in terms of how they want to use the internet. Affordability is a critical piece. It doesn't do the community a lot of benefit to build a brand new network and have prices that half the people in the community cannot afford. And finally, now at the federal level, we have some real policy and programs, the Affordable Connectivity Program that provides up to a $30 discount for broadband services to many families, families up to twice the poverty level. And so that has really helped with affordability. And the fact that people now can afford it now helps a business plan for a new investment in broadband in your community. If you're the typical community that has, 30% of the people who are struggling financially, knowing that those 30% can afford broadband changes the dynamics of network deployment. Certainly, if you're in a community with a predominance of lower income families, this becomes even more important. And so I think providers have recognized this as well, that this will, you'll find that 20-25% of the people may not have broadband service, or they only will have a cellular service because of affordability. And these programs can really help close that gap. Latency is important, and most landline, whether it's a cable modem or a fiber network, have relatively low levels of latency, which is delay. Now with the traditional big satellites that are way up in the sky, 20,000 miles in the sky, that's the biggest weakness of those satellite services is the latency. And the new Starlink kind of low Earth orbit satellites have much better performance on that. And then mobility. Everyone seemingly has a smartphone. They want to be able to take that on the go. And so the idea that people need mobility, which means wireless services, that's a big part of our lifestyle these days. So that's an important thing to think about. Many times it's not wired or wireless, but it's both. For places that are more rural, Certainly the low population density, differences in soils and geography. If you're out on a prairie in farm country, you know, fixed wireless services can be quite good. If you're in a big forest with lots of trees, especially pine trees, that makes it a challenge. The grant processes can be competitive and complicated. Sometimes the providers that are offering lower levels of service just to keep their monopoly service and not support new investment. All these federal dollars now, many providers have really changed their attitudes towards public-private partnerships, and so they're much more interested in partnering with communities on this. The FCC, which collects most of the data for broadband maps, is they're in a process improvement program right now, and all the federal money that is coming is going to rely on those broadband maps to decide who's eligible. Once those maps are published, initially there'll be a chance to challenge them, and sometimes providers might challenge them and say, hey, we provide service here already. Communities will have to be ready to challenge those maps and say, hey, these maps don't reflect reality. They say they're served, but they're not really served. And then digital equity considerations, which are present in both urban and rural areas of, you know, can people afford the service? Do they have devices? Do they have the skills to make use of technology? All those things are important in your community broadband plan. Here's the Illinois broadband map that shows, I think this is a 25 down and 3 up map with wired communities. And we're just going to go through kind of looking at the maps real quickly for your various counties. Here's Bond County, 25 down and 3 up. That's the minimum federal standard for broadband. So if somebody says, well, I have a 10 megabit broadband connection, that's not really accurate, because if it's not 25 megabits, it's not broadband. And so you'll be able to see here in this county, large open areas for broadband service. Here's Kankakee in Pembroke Township and Hopkins Park. And you can see down in that lower right-hand corner, Hopkins Park, and no broadband service there that meets the standard. Kaskaskia College, you can see it's more of a mix, and they're a multi-community area. And you can see off to both the east and west, they're surrounded by places that have decent service, but lots of gray area within those prime counties. And Livingston County, pretty bad. Lot of opportunity in Livingston County. So, and here's Ogle County, more of a mix, that they've got service in some places and not in others. And Shabika is on our team, and she's going to be presenting next week on maps for more detailed look at your maps, and we'll provide you each with a packet of maps that will get you going on this map analysis. And here's Peoria Woodford.
Hey, Bill, George, again, what's the time, what is the age of these maps? Because I know when we first started a couple of years ago, there were some updating issues. Just for my knowledge and my team's knowledge, this is pretty reflective, most recent data. Is this correct? Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And so, yeah, and I think within the last several months, they've updated these, but I'd have to look, and Shabika will fill us in on that next week. November 21 is this data.
Thank you.
So now it's now 7 months old or 6 months old. And then, so what's good enough? And that's always the question. As I mentioned, the FCC standard, the federal government says anything less than 25 down and 3 up is not broadband. Illinois has goals of the 25.3 by 2024, or 100 meg down by 20 up by 2028. We know that the marketplace, though, has really changed. So if we look at the wired marketplace, fiber optics, the ability to go a gigabit up and down is widely available. And now the new networks, so we see that there's plans for multi-gigabit level residential service, and now up to 10 gigabit on fiber. The cable companies use a different technology. We'll talk more about it in a minute, but widely available 1 gig down and 50 meg up for cable companies over a fiber coaxial hybrid network. Those who are still dependent on the copper twisted pair phone lines, DSL service from whether it's AT&T or other landline companies, very likely to have less than that 25 meg and 3 up. And in fact, AT&T has suspended sales of DSL services. So if you don't have, if AT&T is your phone company and you move into a house that doesn't have a cable service available, AT&T won't sell you a new service, even though they have the equipment in place, generally because it's so slow and unreliable that they, for them, it's more problem than it's worth. When we look at the wireless marketplace, we see really a couple different kinds. A fiber-fed fixed wireless service can deliver easily now 50 meg down and 25 up and up to 100 by 50. Cellular, all depends on how far away you are from the service and if you're behind the hill. And then we've talked about this low Earth orbit satellite as a game changer, the Starlink service. So we'll go through some of these, but relatively quickly, and know that it's, I know that I'm going fast, but know that the second or third time you hear this, it will really sink in. And fiber to the premise, fiber to the home, so you see that it's called FTTP or FTTH, or X means really to anywhere. Almost unlimited capacity now. This 10 gigabit service is hard to think about what you would use it for, but we said that about gigabit service not long ago. Symmetrical service, high speed both up and down. And that, as I mentioned, increasingly critical now with these cloud-based services and with the video conferencing that we all do. It's very reliable. There's fewer moving parts, less electronics. Many of those networks, they have equipment at the central office. They've got it at the end of the line at your building, but everything else is really what they would call passive equipment. It's essentially mirrors that split signals into usable data. And so that the reliability is great. Much fiber is buried. And so there's, except when a backhoe hits it, it is very reliable in that way. Fiber optic networks are very low cost to maintain because they have such a low equipment out there in the field. And of course, they're newer. And so newer is easier to maintain. Long life, there's fiber optic in the ground, almost original fiber that still works. They plan on at least 30 years of long life for this. Future proof in terms of those capacities. With these, early on, they just sent one signal light down a fiber, white light blinking on and off. And now they can send different colors down the same fiber optic cable. And so multiple signals going down a single fiber. And know that wireless is really dependent on fiber optics. When you make a cellular call, that goes to the nearest tower, but then immediately onto fiber, and then is routed to as close as they can get over fiber to the next tower. And the last several hundred feet or last mile or two is then carried wirelessly. So if you don't have very good cell service in your community, the ability to get better service is really going to be dependent on getting fiber optic networks in your communities and along your county roads to support a robust wireless network. When Verizon talks about their 5G service, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but that only goes a very short distance, just several blocks, 1,000 feet or so. And so that really requires a lot of fiber optics capacity for 5G. But we know it's expensive. Fiber optics might be, and now of course everything is inflated with so much broadband demand, but $30,000, $40,000 a mile for fiber optic networks. When you look at by housing, you know, in a community, it might be $3,000 a house. Out in the countryside, it can be over $10,000 a house. And we know it takes time to build those networks. And here's the problem with the DSL service over copper lines. A few years back, the federal government subsidized the big companies to build broadband in rural communities. And this is a community in kind of exurban Minnesota, not far from the Twin Cities. And so all these red dots are fiber, or there's fiber to those. Those are DSL access modules. They call them DSLAMs. But within 1,000 feet, you can get 50 megabit service. But once you get to half a mile or so, you're down under 25 megs. And once you're at 2 miles, you're down under 10 megs. And those are speeds that aren't really competitive anymore. And that's really reliant on high quality copper networks. And in most cases, these copper networks are 30, 40, or 50 years old and have a lot of degradation to them that they don't work so well. So that's why DSL is really seen kind of as a dead technology. The cable modems, they use fiber optic deeper and deeper into the networks to serve 100 to 250 homes, that download capacity of a gig. And we know that the cable companies are, you know, widely deployed in almost every community in America in terms of, you know, if you've got 500, 1,000 people likely to have a cable network. Some of those have some age to them, but most of them have been upgraded to what they call this DOCSIS 3.1 that delivers that gigabit service. The cable companies have worked together on new technologies for 10 gigabit symmetrical service over coaxial cable. But a lot of companies now are just moving right to fiber to the home as a technology when they're building new networks, just because the fiber is, in many cases, cheaper to deploy than the fiber coax models. The big issue, of course, is the non-symmetrical speeds. And so 50 is about as much as you get on those. And then traditionally, cable companies have been less interested in investing in the rural countryside, seeking higher densities. Many times cable companies, when I work with them, will say they want 20 houses per road mile, while the smaller phone cooperative might move in an area that has, you know, 8 houses or so per road mile. But now with these dollars available and coming online, whether those are the ARPA dollars or the upcoming infrastructure dollars, there's a lot more interest in serving rural areas. And that really is company by company decisions. The cellular, we know it's mobile. We finally implemented the full 4G services. The average speeds on cellular, 35 down, 12 up. Although I live very close to a cell tower with my service, and speeds are regularly over 100. Promises that's 5G. I mentioned Verizon's this short millimeter wave, which only goes like 1,000 feet, but it's very high capacity. But we also now, the companies, and especially T-Mobile, you see them advertising their home product that can go several miles, 5 to 7 miles. And again, the farther you are from that tower, the slower your speeds, but they can certainly deliver up to 100 meg or more in some places. We know that a lot of rural America does not have a great cellular service. We know it's relatively expensive, and they say unlimited, but once you hit a certain amount of data, they slow you down very significantly.
There's our speeds.
Hey, Bill, I have a question related to that, or actually seeking advice. I'm very glad to hear you. This is George again. Very glad to hear you talk about cellular service, because this is, obviously with broadband is a major issue for us, but so is cellular service. And we will be looking obviously for advice from this group too as well, because we've gotten to the point with our area that our cellular service is so bad, we have actually secured funds or identified funds to even build our own tower, but it still lacked the attention is not there from the major carriers, even if we would provide the infrastructure, because the return on investment for them is not there. So we would be all ears for any type of input or best practices to try to get their attention to this area. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, and sometimes communities will invest in, as a strategy, a county will invest in a fiber ring. And so an institutional fiber ring that connects, the county seat with, to the state capital, but also including some or all of the communities in the county. And so they'll be building that fiber ring and use it for their own government purposes, which could be money saver over time. But then they'll also lease that fiber optic, because when they build a fiber network, you build in a lot of extra fibers so that there's more people can use it. And so some of the customers for that might be somebody who wants to build off residential service to neighborhoods or in different towns. If you have to build 20 miles of fiber to get to a town, a smaller provider in particular is not likely to spend $500,000 or more to build that middle mile fiber. And so that cell companies are also very interested in those middle mile networks. So they might even help pay for that kind of middle mile network so that they can get from place to place. Counties also do some things where they identify public lands, and maybe especially on high ground, or they'll look at their maps and see where the best locations for towers are and work with the landowner to try and encourage them to be collaborative and trying to attract better cellular service. So there are some strategies you can use there. On this fixed wireless, and what mean by fixed wireless is that it's a radio on one tower that is connected to a radio, on your house. So when we talk about radios, that's really the receiving and sending device for the internet service, and that's what's fixed is, as opposed to like mobile cellular service. And we've seen great improvements on there. It wasn't long ago that you're lucky to get 10 megabits on a fixed wireless service, and now they can deliver 100. At the same time, the wired services have gone from 25 meg to 1,000 megabits. So the wireless certainly is not keeping up with the fiber optics. Most of these services require the line of sight that the radios can see each other. If you're in a pine forest, that becomes really difficult. The equipment on the fixed wireless services has a 5 to 7 year life. And so it has some higher operating costs for folks, higher installation costs. And again, that signal weakens with distance. The geostationary satellites, the HughesNet is probably the biggest one, available everywhere, of course, and you need just a very narrow path to the sky for that, because the satellite stays in one place. And so it's, from your house to that satellite requires only a pretty narrow path for that. They've improved their speeds, but again, it's at kind of higher prices, lower bandwidth, low speeds, high delays. And so it'd be hard to do interactive Zoom calls many times with this kind of older satellite service. And the weather impacts the service quality definitely. So cloudy, windy can cause some problems. Now Starlink, the it's really diminished the latency, and now is really almost comparable to many wired networks. The speeds are variable, and one of the reasons for that is that the satellites are moving. So it's almost like in your car and you're going through a place and listening to AM radio or even like cell phones. You know, your service is good for a minute, and then it's not so good as you move from a tower, and then a new tower comes in to play. And that's the way it is with these satellites that are circling the Earth at relatively low speed or at low altitudes. The sign-up costs are high. Residential is $600 now for Starlink. If you can get it, they're kind of behind times and a lot of issues there. They have a business price, and whether that's a affordable subscription, $110. You know, when people talk about affordability, you know, for me, a home office person, a business person, paying for $110 for an internet connection is not a big thing, because I get so much value out of that connection. But for families that are struggling, you know, $110 a month could be a big number. And we know that, especially in rural places where you've got several mediocre options, sometimes people are buying multiple subscriptions to make sure that at least one of them works. And they might have particular uses for different connections. Where you have cellular, you wouldn't want to be updating your software and your computers using your cellular data, but that might be perfectly fine at night, especially with satellite, because then those downloads don't count against your data cap. And so we see people spending hundreds of dollars on internet service that isn't really that great. And then quickly, when we think about broadband improvement, we build that all into this program here. The talking to providers, doing the feasibility study work like surveys and looking at the maps and so on, identifying your provider partners, the funding, your local funding, and applying for those things. And so here's kind of a little chart that says, here's where we are right now. We're in the awakening stage. We're going to go find out about broadband and figure out that we need to do something about it. We do a lot of this data gathering and the maps and the best practices and getting information from your community, interviewing providers, and then moving through this whole range of identifying what are our best steps moving forward. And so you can see that there's some opportunities to celebrate here, and there's some opportunities to go back to the beginning to start again if you're not successful the first time. The feasibility studies, again, these are many times, and we've seen in the Accelerate programs, some communities will get to the end of that program and decide they need to have a more formal feasibility study that's still trying to attract a broadband provider to come in and partner, or look more closely at a public sector strategy to make this happen. We get you a long way down the path here with the Accelerate program, but we don't help you do engineering studies or cost estimates or a business plan for a network. And that's really what a feasibility study is that financial analysis and so on. You want that study to serve as a decision-making funnel, so you're deciding along the way about what decisions you're going to make, as opposed to waiting to the end and trying to decide what's the best path. We see all kinds of partnership models, ownership models. Networks can be 100% private, they can be 100% public, with options in between. And same thing with the service delivery. We're seeing increasingly now the ownership of the network can be separated from who's delivering the services on that network. So I'd always encourage you to keep all your options open, so you've really thought about what's the best path for your community. Things to be aware of. There's a new RDOF program, and that it's not so new, but about 18 months ago, they auctioned off a lot of dollars for providers, and kind of a reverse auction where those who bid the least said, hey, we'll deliver service for the least amount of subsidy. There's a lot of unexpected winners in that, and many of them are companies like AMG and LTD that are been traditionally wireless companies, and now they bid to do fiber. The FCC has been slow to approve their final kind of applications, and so that's it's a real source of discontent in the industry and in communities. And the FCC is kind of slow to work through that. And now with all these other federal dollars coming, it's made that even more complex. Here's all the different federal dollars that are available, and we'll go through those. We've got a whole week where we talk about nothing but federal dollars. And so with that, I'd stop sharing and entertain any quick questions. We'll definitely send out all the slide decks to each team. And I'm looking here at the questions on the chat. Each team can create their own shared space for working documents, you know, in assignments. Some communities use Google Docs for that, especially if you have a school technology coordinator on your team. They're very expert in Google Docs and so on, as is our Robbie here for any advice on that. A lot of people use Teams for that, but that's really a local exercise there to keep your stuff in place. Yeah, Pamela is looking at maps. Why don't you, I see Shabika is our mapping person. And so Shabika, do you want to give Pamela your email so that you can have a conversation to make sure that we get the entire Ogle area in on the maps? And we can certainly share the team coordinators with all the other team coordinators. Thanks, Kathy, for that question. Good. So thanks for those questions. And I'm just looking to see here what how we're doing on time. We're late, of course. I'm such a blabbermouth. So let's go into your, we're going to go back into your teams now. And we've got until about 10:15. And just, I think it's time to have kind of just a situational analysis, begin the discussion about what are the challenges your community is facing with broadband and what do you hope to accomplish. So this can be a wide-ranging conversation. Just let her rip. It's not it's just the beginning of this conversation, but it's a great opportunity to get input from everyone, to hear what the impact is on the different, you know, from the school, what's happening with the kids, what's the geography you're looking at that has the biggest challenges, and so on. So we're going to go back into our rooms. Nancy will open those. We're going to come back, and why don't we say at 10:20, Nancy, and we'll do some just quick, ask somebody from each team to kind of go through and do a quick little summary report on kind of the challenges and situation in your communities.